We are about to witness exactly what kind of negotiator Trump is as he and Vance throw a tantrum over Zelensky's need for security guarantees.
He broken this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what you're
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
This entire meeting?
No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Here's a summary of what happened. Zelensky criticized Trump and Vance for not giving security guarantees because Putin broke peace agreements in 2014 and then again in 2022. Vance freaked out, saying Zelensky was ungrateful for the aid that the US has given Ukraine and demanded that Zelensky prostrate himself. Trump then escalated, saying Zelensky was gambling with World War III and to come back when he was ready for peace. This display was a present to Putin, who sees exactly how much he can win. Pushing for peace under any circumstances is weak and fearful. Trump and Vance have portrayed themselves as pathetic cowards that will let Russia do whatever it wants and blame Ukraine for it after taking their natural resources and leaving them vulnerable to reinvasion. Succumbing to the fear of World War III is ceding to Russia's nuclear capabilities. What if it were a NATO country? Would we allow Russia to take part of Poland to avoid World War III? Every country would race to gain nuclear capabilities to deter an invasion because the status quo will end up being to bow to nuclear powers that happily threaten to use them. Should we let North Korea take South Korea, lest it unleash nuclear weapons? We are enabling bad actors to undermine territorial integrity if we allow Russia to take part of Ukraine. Dan Crenshaw, a House Republican, does a good job of describing how territorial integrity is crucial for maintaining the global stability that the U.S. prospers from.
Now, I think people forget the geopolitical strategies of this. This, for America, even for Europeans, this isn't so much about Ukraine. It's about Russia. And yes, I'd hate to break it to you, but it's not a contradiction to say that they are a second-rate power, but they would also invade Baltic states. That has long been part of Putin's grander plan for greater Russia. And they can do it if Europe and the United States lets them. Yes, they can do it to a small state if they let them. This is kind of how World War II happened, if I may remind everyone. There is a domino effect here. And there is grander purpose by Putin, and he said you just have to listen to what he says. You don't have to take my word for it, to expand their sphere. They can say that they feel under threat by NATO. They're full of crap. We know for a fact they've never felt threatened by NATO, only to the extent that they don't like NATO because it means they can't conquer other countries and take their stuff. Now, here's the biggest important part about geostrategic implications for the United States. This is why it's about Russia, not Ukraine. When you allow dictators to just conquer other countries and take their stuff, you have reverted us to a pre-World War II history. That's problematic. That was a time in history, and it lasted for thousands of years, when we didn't have a global economy. Life sucked. There was tens of millions dead in wars because it was normalized for dictators to invade others if they wanted to take their stuff. And for the last 80 years, America has led an order where we don't allow that. That's actually what's
Like
at
Iraq,
stake
you
for
mean?
American
Like Iraq,
interests.
you mean?
It's American
Like what happened
deterrence
in
for the next
Iraq?
50 years. Now, I'm with you. You have to
Like
talk
Iraq?
to Russia. You have to end this somehow. The war of attrition cannot continue. I think we agree there. You have some weird facts about what's going on the battlefield that I think are just untrue, but we agree mainly on what needs to happen. Glenn's buddy was getting his butt kicked at the local bar. He would let him because he would say, well, I have no chance of winning, so forget it. I mean, that's another problem. That's a moral and ethical issue, and you don't have to care about that. But I think on the geopolitical issue of the world order for the last 80 years that America has largely benefited from, massively, actually, you have to take that into account when you deal with global players that want to engage in the first global, war of conquest since World War II. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Taking part of Ukraine would be a victory for Putin and others who wish to take the territory of sovereign nations. I'd like to remind you of Trump's willingness to use military force to take over Greenland. See any parallels? Setting this precedent may very well be intentional. Not giving Ukraine security guarantees out of fear of nuclear escalation would also mean that there is no justification for NATO to exist, since a defensive alliance would lead to World War III if a member nation were invaded, and that apparently is a sufficient deterrent for the US to get involved. This is not peace through strength. This is a policy of appeasement. Without enforceable security guarantees, any peace agreement is just a pause before Russia's next invasion. The reason Zelensky insists on security guarantees is because Russia has broken every peace treaty it's had with Ukraine.
And you meant stuff getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me.
For you
that wasn't with me. That was with a...
Any agreement negotiated would just be a ceasefire until Russia sees fit to invade again, given there is no significant deterrent. This is why security guarantees are non-negotiable for Zelensky, because he would only be enabling Putin to invade again at the cost of $500 billion in minerals and a large portion of Ukraine's territory. Zelensky and the Ukrainian people would likely prefer to keep fighting than to live in fear of the inevitable reinvasion that faces Ukraine with half its resources to buy support robbed from them. Even if the return of all Ukraine's territory and security guarantees were part of the deal, Trump is still asking for far too much compensation for the aid that the US has given. The $350 billion figure is completely fabricated. At most, the figure stands at $183 billion. Protecting the global order by enforcing territorial integrity on its own is worth the price paid so far. Add to that, we have used Ukrainian soldiers to cripple a major adversary. Our interests have been promoted in every dollar spent towards the Ukrainian war effort, and now we demand repayment many times over after the fact. The resource extraction sought by Trump is analogous to a doctor demanding his patient on life support sign over half of what they own. Putting aside everything else that aggravates the depravity of this so-called negotiation, it is absolutely despicable to go back on the negotiated terms of repayment in order to threaten the destruction of a country for over double the amount loaned to them. Instead of demanding payment from Russia's $300 billion in seized assets, which in any just settlement would go to repairing Ukraine, Trump has opted to threaten Ukraine into conceding their resources. What does this do to the reputation of the US? We are destroying our credibility and standing on the global stage while we retreat into isolationism. The cause of the war was Russia. The one who illegally invaded was Russia. The war persists at the discretion of Russia. Hundreds of thousands are dead because of Russia. Remind me which country that starts with the letter R should pay for their unprovoked and illegal invasion. Trump told Zelensky to come back when he's ready for peace. All Trump's peace means for Zelensky is losing everything and squandering the lives and resources lost protecting his country. The US has already invested so much into a victory for Ukraine, and now that they are at a stalemate, Russia stands to lose in a war of attrition as its ability to pay for the invasion is suffocated through sanctions. Internally, it is also very likely that the dissatisfaction of those in power at the outcome of the war will see an end to Putin's ambitions. These negotiation tactics of Trump will end in the waste of US and European resources and the loss of Ukraine, in the hopes of ending a war that will cease to be viable for Putin to continue. Shutting out Europe in the negotiations and pushing for an agreement that is disagreeable to them only continues Trump's parade of antagonizing our allies. In addition to the bad faith extortion of Ukraine and favorability shown to a mutual adversary, the US is crippling its image in the international community, as well as its ability to foster cooperation. In summary, we are extorting Ukraine in exchange for vague notions of mutual benefit, destroying the US's credibility and standing, throwing away our investment in Ukraine, emboldening our enemies, alienating our allies, and undermining US interests. Trump's so-called negotiation is nothing more than a veiled surrender, one that not only betrays Ukraine, but also cripples the global order that has maintained stability for decades. This is not a strategy for peace. It is a blueprint for future conflicts.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden.